is this is not an era. This is not a cycle. This is not a let's get ready for summer, then we'll figure out how to go back to normal life. Like there is no more normal life. The identity needs to change. This is a lifetime contract that you're signing for yourself. Okay. What's up, everybody? Episode 30 of Pursuit of Balance. We're going to talk about 7 reasons why most people are not seeing any success in the gym, and one of the biggest faults that I think so many people make. And this was something that, I use a little help on trying to figure out some data of actual things, but more importantly, I was just like, this is a conversation I had with a Fitzer last week, and he's like, do you am I going to see results? And I'm like, well, it depends. There's context to that. And that's obviously what I want to expand on today. So I wrote down 7 different things that I think I see are the most common faults as far as my job for clients and why people don't see results. It's like, it is one of those tough things I think in the gym to really come to the consensus on, that just showing up to the gym and doing the work is a huge step for most of us. But unfortunately, it's not going to be enough for you to move the needle to guarantee results, right? So these are things that I kind of wrote in order, but I don't know, as I went through it this morning, I was like, I don't know if there's really that matters to you guys. Okay, so let's just start from the top. Number 1, I think one of the biggest common faults that I see is a lack of intensity with the training, right? And the thing that I like to remind every single person that I work with, and every single client that comes to our gym, and just anybody that's listening to this working out by themselves or on their own, that the intensity is what drives adaptation. Right? Your body is being provided a stimulus, and that stimulus is providing an adaptation, and the adaptation is giving you the growth or the results that you're looking for. Now, when you guys think about results, this can be a little bit subjective, right? Some of us are working out to just feel better and live a long time and have better energy or have some, better mental clarity. For me personally, it's I just feel good mentally and emotionally when I'm working out. I want to be consistent with that. Some of us, it's getting stronger. Some of us, it's getting out of pain. Some of us, it's losing weight or recomping by losing some fat, building some muscle. And for most of us, it's obviously a little bit of everything, right? So we want to find results and with whatever kind of goal we have set for ourselves. But no matter what the result is, I think the only context I would say out of from the goal setting perspective that has, like I said, some context is if you're someone that's just working out to feel better and to stay consistent, you don't have any ambitions on a race or an event, or you're happy with where your weight's at or your body composition's at, that is the only time I would say for this one with intensity. I think there can be a little bit of context around do you need to be pushing a gas pedal down all the time with your training, or more times than not, obviously for the sake of this conversation? And the answer is probably less than everything else. But the only thing I will tell you, just from my own personal experience, that I think I kind of fall in this bucket a little bit, is for me, good workouts are rewarding, right? So that intensity behind the workout makes me feel good, right? So there's a lot of times, and I would say honestly, since I've opened up the business over the last 9 years, for me personally, it's I'm happy with my weight. I'm happy with my body composition. I feel it's of course always an answer of yeah, I would love to be stronger. I'd love to be faster. I'd love to be a little bit leaner. There's always a little bit there, but for the most part, overall, I feel good. And I've always just wanted to as long as I can keep my consistency there, I feel good. But I will say that when I do have hard workouts, I go on a harder run, or I have boxing lately has been that for me. Boxing's just been absolutely kicking my ass when I do it, and I love it. Or a good training session where you feel good, things like that. So even in that nuance of that one, I still think intensity is going to be the big thing. But coming back to everyone else's goal, if you do want to get stronger, if you do want to lose weight, you have to remember that plateaus are a real thing. And unfortunately, there's probably more people than not that are actually in a plateau of training. If I were to just go take a microphone and go to a 24-hour fitness and ask any people hey, how long have you been here? How have your results been? I can guarantee that majority of the people that I ask have probably been there for a decent amount of time, maybe, but they've probably not been seeing that much progress, right? So when I say intensity, I guess the first way to look at this is how would we measure intensity? And there's kind of 2 things that I like to use. Number 1 is RPE, which is your rate of perceived exertion, or RIR, which is reps in reserve. And these are basically the exact inverse of each other, right? So if I say, I probably use RPE personally a little bit more as far as subjectively asking a client, and RIR is kind of how I program it more on the back end. So here's what I mean by that. Rate of perceived exertion is basically on a scale 1 to 10, 10 being intense. How would you rate that set, right? Now, if you're training at like a 6, a 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1, I can almost guarantee you once again that you're not going to see much progress in your training, right? Because like there's not enough intensity to drive a new adaptation, right? Now, if you're training at like a 9 or a 10 all the time, also on the other side of it, you could possibly be running yourself into injury and overtraining, and that's where some of the structure is going to matter a little bit more. But ideally, a sweet spot for most of us, and this kind of comes back to the good old Pareto principle of like the 80-20 rule. It's like if I can get about an 8 out of 10 effort most times, right? Sometimes I'm going to shoot for the 9 or 10 every once in a while if I'm going through a peak week, like week 6 for this. Like obviously when I'm filming this is week 6. But for the most part, like an absolute minimum, I want to be getting a minimum 7, but ideally closer to an 8, right? And now on the reps in reserve, what that basically means is I would have anywhere from 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, or 2 reps left. So here's what I mean by that. If I put some weight on the bar, I put 100 pounds on a barbell for somebody, and I say do a set of 5. What reps in reserve means is like that weight, I could probably do 6, I could probably do 7, would basically mean like an RPE of an 8 or a 9, right? So they're kind of the exact opposite. If I have 2 reps in reserve, that's basically an 8 RPE, right? So not to make this confusing, I think the most important thing for you guys listening to this is just I would use the RPE scale because I think it's one of the more easier ones to measure. I think where some failure lies in that is a lot of clients or maybe people that are newer to training don't really fully understand the capacity or capability of what your body is able to handle, right? So what I mean by that is like you might think like, oh, that's an 8 out of 10, when in reality, like as a coach, I think like after a few weeks and few months of being with somebody, like you can learn really, really quick. To be honest with you, I can look at someone's facial expressions and body language and speed of the bar movement, and I can tell you like that's not an 8, like that's probably a 6. So that is something I think it takes a little bit of development around that. But I put that as number 1 because I see this so often with clients where in the beginning, I think the intensity, and when I say intensity too, it doesn't necessarily need to be always weight, right? Like this could be your tempo. This could be the speed of your runs or your lifts. This could even be volume a little bit, right? The volume can add intensity without even having necessarily weight, right? It's like if I do a 3 rep max or if I do 20 reps, like those both can feel hard in different ways. One would be with more weight, one would be with more volume of repetitions. But for someone in the beginning, it might be just more range of motion, right? Like if you're someone that's newer to it, just like using tempo, using time under tension, and using range are great ways for us to progressively overload in the beginning without necessarily changing the rep scheme with sets and reps or without even changing the weight necessarily. But no matter what part of that phase of training that you're in, the intensity needs to be the focus because if you're the average client, like, you know, it's funny, our average membership, the most popular membership is like probably 3 times a week. Our attendance is actually a little bit lower, meaning like what people are supposed to be showing up ends up being a little bit less. So it ends up being closer to like the 2 number, which is interesting. So it's like if I have somebody that's only coming twice a week, that means you have 5 days off, right? And for most clients, not all, a lot of people are not doing anything necessarily by themselves. Or if they are, it's a hell of a lot easier than what they would get with their trainer or a class or things like that. So I always say, it's like, hey, if you're only here twice a week or 3 times a week, I want an intense workout, right? Because you're still going to have 4 days of not seeing me or 5 days of not seeing me. So like that intensity needs to be enough for us to drive that growth. So like I said, not to get too deep in the weeds with that, I think the easiest thing I can give you guys is just a little takeaway is like try to shoot for an 8 on average, right? And then maybe once a month, depending on your style of training, have a week of 9 or 10, right? Have a week where you really kind of push the tempo a little bit. So like the way that we structure it for our 6-week cycles, week 1 is accommodation phase, right? Like we're just going to focus on just like understanding the movement. We're not going to kill ourselves. We're just going to learn the new movements, even if it's movements you have done. And then weeks 2, 4, and 6, I generally say like, hey, let's go like at least one of those working sets. Like let's make it a heavier weight, right? So if I have 4 sets of 8, maybe one of them is going to be heavier and 3 of them are going to be a tad bit lighter than that top set. On the odd weeks, on week 3 and 5, I like to shoot for more volume, right? So if I have 4 sets of 5 and only one of those was at, you know, a heavy weight, the next week I'm going to try to take that heavy weight we only did once and do it 2 or 3 or 4 times. So I'll add volume. So having it systematically done for you guys obviously here is much easier. But for anybody that's listening to this that's not at FL, like that's just like a strategy that I would take away. Okay, number 2, frequency of training and frequency of volume. This kind of comes back on that last point that I just made. I think so many people The biggest mistake that I see for somebody that's new, especially, is they kind of like this dip at the toe in the water type of like mindset, meaning like, I'm just going to see if it works. So I'm just going to start with 1 day a week, or I'm going to start with twice a week. I say this all the time to new clients. Like, I don't even sell a one-time a week membership. In the very beginning of FL, I had a one-time a week membership. And about 3 months in, I remember sitting down with Mike, who I was working with at the time, and I was like, I think I want to get rid of it. He's like, why? I was like, well, A, it's the highest cancellation membership. B, it's damn near a close guarantee to somebody not seeing the results that they're here for. Or at least obviously for the goals that they had set up front, or the timeline, right? Because like doing something once a week, that's like, oh, I want to go be really successful with my business. I want to work on Mondays only. I'm going to take the other 6 days off. It's always the analogy I give. So it's like, it's not enough frequency to drive enough volume to drive enough adaptation. So frequency, like if I can give you guys my biggest piece of advice, you need to be at an absolute minimum trying to shoot for 3 times a week. I think 3 to 4 is a sweet spot. 2, if you're doing other things, but that's where I say there's context. I get a lot of new clients on their assessment and their like initial intake to go like, well, how many times a week should I be coming here? And I say, well, that depends on what you're doing by yourself. If you're doing nothing by yourself, minimum 3, ideally 4. If you're running or doing a triathlon or doing Pilates, you play pickleball a couple times a week or a sport, yeah, 2 or 3 might be fine in the beginning, right? And once again, it depends on the goal, right? Like if your goal is to prioritize more, muscle development, then it's like, yeah, you're going to want to be in the gym more than you are running or doing Pilates or your sport. If your goal is to be better at running or better at your sport and you want to do this as kind of something to be complementary and supportive of what you're doing, then 2 or 3 is fine. So that's where I think the frequency thing is something I would love to challenge everyone, because for me, I think that's just the mindset of getting into something is like, let me start slow. And I think you can start slow even with a good frequency. So it's like you can go 3 times a week, but maybe don't push the intensity part in the very beginning. Like I said earlier, it's just like maybe prioritize range, maybe prioritize the competency of how you're like doing the movement, maybe make the time under the tension the more challenging part. But if you go as hard as you possibly can 4 or 5 days a week for somebody that's brand new, yeah, of course, you're going to either lead yourself to injury or burn yourself out or just completely trash your confidence because you'll be like, why am I so sore? I can't handle any of this. So that is obviously a thinking point for you guys, is like finding the balance between those, because frequency can drive intensity to a degree. But frequency, I think about it, I look at that in the relationship to volume, right? Like if I was only training somebody, let's just say the worst case scenario, once a week, I would probably either do 2 things. Number 1, I would do a total body approach, so I get a little bit of everything. Or I would say, what are you doing by yourself? And if they are doing something by themselves, or what is the body part or like area that you feel like you're lacking the most, and we'll prioritize that. And maybe I would do like this A/B approach. But it's much harder as a coach to sit there and be like, okay, I can guarantee that we're going to see some success, because it's just like there's so many variables that are left out of my hands, right? So frequency, I think, is obviously going to be a big one there. Next one is structuring progress with time, right? Right. What I mean by that is like how you progress your workouts. And this is like this good old term and adage that we've all heard, that like progressive overload, right? Progressive overload could be by adding more volume over time. They could be adding more weight over time. They could be like those other things that I talked about, your range, your time under tension, etc. So you can play around with tempos and other parts of your programming. But in the beginning, to be clear, I think it matters a hell of a lot less about how organized your training is. Because if you're not consistent with your training, or never have been, or you're brand new to it, the beautiful thing for you is almost everything works, right? Like, and I like my joke is always like, we can do Zumba together. We could probably dance in a class for 30 minutes and you would probably lose weight and feel a little bit better, right? So I always like to say that like in the beginning, the most important part of your goal is the consistency of just showing up, right? Versus the being specific or a hyper paranoid about like, how am I structuring this? How many reps, how many sets, how long should my rest be? What weight should I be using here, coach? And I'm like, for most people, I'm like, you're trying to learn calculus and you don't even know how to add and subtract yet. So it's like building the foundation of being consistent with it in the beginning is going to be the first one. But once you get past that initial phase of training, what I mean by the structure of progress with time is over time, the details will start to matter more, right? So what I mean by that is like your body is going to get through a level of adaptation after a couple phases of training where it's like, okay, I'm used to squatting or I'm used to deadlifting or I'm used to pushing some weight. Like it's eventually going to be like, okay, that adaptation is there. I'm starting to build some muscle. I'm starting to get stronger. I'm starting to build an aerobic capacity. So like, and once you get through that foundational phase of training, that's where the progressive overload and the nuances of structure really, really matter, right? So that's like for our clients, once again, it's easy for you guys because we're taking care of building that structure for you, right? So like we'll say, hey, the reps and sets are going to be fixed, but what we're going to do is we're going to try to just progress like volume, then top set weight, then volume, then top set weight, like I mentioned. I've done it a couple times. I don't do it as much because I think it's a little bit harder at a scale of a class, like a group class kind of model versus doing it on PT. But sometimes like I've done it where it's like, okay, now we're going to find a weight for these first couple weeks and now we're just going to add more reps. So maybe it's like week 1, we're doing 5 reps. And then week 2, I'm doing 6 reps. So I'm adding volume over time. So you can play around with it on obviously how you guys structure it. But this is where I think the data tracking is really going to matter for this person, because if I'm working with a professional athlete or someone that's, a little bit more detailed with where they're at in their training, like I'll track the weight that they're using. I'll track the volume that we're doing. I'll track the RPE of how they're feeling, because tracking it is just going to give me a lot more data and detail of like what I need to be doing, as the training goes on to really, and then really like understand the data tracking of like the actual progress that someone's making. Because once again, if you are someone that then starts to have structure, intensity, and frequency just through the first 3 that we have, like you're going to start to see some results a lot faster, right? But then when we get it, I also like want to understand that like there's going to be times where you plateau. There's going to be times where you feel like I'm not really getting as strong as I would like at the pace I would like, or I stopped kind of losing weight a little bit. So even like the structure of progressing with time relates to the nutrition side, right? Like how is your nutrition going to be the exact same calorie intake for your entire life? And the answer is no, right? Like your lifestyle is going to change. A lot of people say metabolism slows down as they age. Like I think there's a lot of bullshit behind that statement, because in reality, it's like your lifestyle has changed more than your metabolism has. Like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, most people were on their feet. They're playing sports. They're active. They're outside. Now they're like, well, I got a full-time career. I'm sedentary. I got kids and I don't move as much. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not your metabolism, it's your lifestyle. And I see that more with, I would say, a lot of my clients. I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing outside of here? Because if you're not doing a lot outside of here, obviously it's just going to be hard to only blame the training, right? But the training detail of how we look at structure is going to be a huge piece. Next one, I feel like I'm leading myself into everyone, is we're going to look at aerobic work in steps outside the gym. So what I mean by that is, coming back to this kind of frequency thing, is there's 168 hours in a week. This is always the way I like to kind of sell the importance of why we do check-ins with our clients, right? I say there's 168 hours in a week. The average client's coming here 3 times a week, 2, 3, whatever it is, right? If the average client comes here 3, that means that they have 165 hours left by themselves where they never see me, right? So you have 3 hours a week with me where I'll write the workout for you. I'll structure it. I'll progress it for you. You have 3 hours a week where I'm going to teach you how to do it correctly and safely. You have 3 hours a week where I'm also going to be able to push you harder than you can push yourself, right? So you have 3 hours a week where I can really capitalize on getting a lot more ROI out of that time. But my reminder to everybody is you also have 165 hours where you can go and fuck that up, right? Like, so what I mean by that is there's a lot more nuance to achieving a goal for somebody, right? And it doesn't matter what the goal is, once again. If I want to lose weight, I want to get stronger, I want to get out of pain, whatever. So all those other hours, if you look at this mathematically, it's like that means that 98, 97% of your life is going to be spent without your coach and trainer. So I'm not saying don't blame your trainers, because there's sometimes that we should be blamed because maybe the other parts that we should be controlling are not there. But this is why I view check-ins as such a big thing, because now I can give you some structure. So the 2 things that I would say, and like I'm doing this with the, well, by the time you guys hear this episode, actually, I think I'll probably have already announced the email, but I'm doing a nutrition challenge again. And I'm doing it basically in 3 parts. There's going to be 3 strength training days that you have to be doing. There's going to be 3 runs a week that you have to be doing. And then there's going to be obviously nutrition tracking as far as tracking protein, calories, things like that. I like to do them, and I use it kind of as just like a general reset for you guys, right? Is like, it's just going to be like a hard 21 days to do things that maybe most of us aren't doing currently. And that could be maybe some of us, it's going to be running's going to be new. And some of us, maybe the tracking calories is going to be new. Maybe the no drinking, like all the little things I'm going to put in there for the stipulations to make you successful for it. But the thing that I always view as like the biggest missed opportunity for most people is two things. It's the step count and it's your aerobic work, right? And I think those two obviously are very parallel to each other because for some people, just getting their steps in could be some level of aerobic work. But for most of us, like your steps, you're going to need an additional layer of some aerobic cardiovascular training on top. Like if you look at from a fitness perspective, the number one predictor of health and longevity, not like lifestyle. I'm not talking about friends, purpose, like things that I like to talk about. It's your VO2 max, right? It's your cardiovascular health. It's your ability to like be aerobically fit, right? And I think so many people just ignore that, right? And so that could be running, that could be hiking for some, that could be biking, that could be swimming, that could be playing sports. Steps, like I would say, like most of the time when I look at my clients' steps on like their Oura ring or whatever they're using, it's like they're at 4,000 steps a day, 5,000 steps a day. I'm like, at an absolute minimum, you need to be at 8,000 steps plus, right? I think like 8 to 12 is kind of the sweet spot. And for some of us, like, like I work on my feet, my average is probably more like 10 to 15 on a working day and maybe 6 to 10, maybe on a rest day where I'm not moving as much. I do have random Sundays a couple times a month where I'm like, I barely break 2,000. But over the average of a week, I mean, obviously that's what we care about. Is like, hey, if I'm going for 10,000 steps a day times 7, it's like I want 70,000 steps a week, right? So those two things are really going to dictate from a pain management perspective, from a body composition perspective, and even too from a strength perspective. I think a lot of times strength athletes, doesn't matter if it's an athlete for a sport or Olympic lifter or power lifter, things like that, they forget that your output will increase with strength with having a good base of aerobic fitness, right? And it's not like you need to be the best runner. You don't need to be running a 5-minute mile to become stronger with your powerlifting, right? It's just like having a good foundation, I think, is going to be something that's going to allow you to have more output with your training itself on how you recover and your et cetera, right? So those are the things that I would say on the outside should be most people's priority. Yeah, I think mobility is always something I think is skipped on, but I think you can get a lot of that with good training if you're doing your sessions correctly with your training. And if you're not, then yes. Like last night, for example, it's like I just literally brought out the lacrosse ball and kind of sat on the floor and rolled out my QL and my glutes and my quads and like my tibs and lower leg. And then just like, I'm like, oh, I'm sore. I'm a little bit tight right now. So I think spending some time on the floor, spending some time on the foam roller, spending some time doing some stretches is great. But there are also a handful of clients that they're doing yoga, they're doing Pilates, they're doing some type of movement stuff. So that could be a little subjective as well. Number five is probably the number one thing for most of our goals, but people's nutrition is just fucking trash, right? Like people are still eating a lot of carbs and a lot of fats and undereating on protein and undereating on fiber and overeating on calories. And also the reporting for those that even are tracking, right? I think like there was an interesting, I forget who did it, but it was like an interesting study that was like saying that like, I want to say it was anywhere from like 20 to 30% off on the calories that people are tracking, right? Like the calorie tracking, like even though I do like to do it as like a quick little reset for clients every once in a while, just to kind of create some awareness and accountability. I always say that the science is not true. What I mean by that is not that calorie tracking is not true. I think like it's almost impossible to be perfectly accurate, right? Like I just saw a video actually like last week and it was saying this guy was like, oh, an egg without cooked in oil is, 70 calories. An egg cooked in oil is 200 calories. And I'm like, well, not really, because like you got to remember all that oil that's still in the pan, you're not slurping it out of it. Like, so, there's so much room for error, I think, when it comes to tracking calories. But at the end of the day, you guys need to remember, it's like, yes, nutrition is, I don't know what the way to say it is. It's like, I think it's simple, but it's not easy. What I mean by that is like knowing what good food is. Like so many people in the nutrition space just like to be so dogmatic and so like, extreme with their points of views. And it's like, I do not understand. Well, I do understand. I think from a marketing perspective, it's much easier to call out one group and say, this is my point of view and this works well. When in reality, it's like, I've always said this is like, there's parallels to make all of them work. It's like, yeah, I want to be in a caloric deficit. Yeah, I want to have 80% of my food be whole foods, right? Yeah, I want to prioritize having more food come from home cooked meals versus eating out. But like most of us are still just going too hard on carbs and fats and too low on fiber and protein. And it's not that carbs or fats are the enemy. I want to be clear on that. Like you can have a lot of carbs, you can have a decent amount of fats depending on lifestyle, right? What I mean by that is if you are training at a high intensity with a decent volume, if you are active, like I consider myself very active. I can eat a lot of carbs and be fine, right? Like I almost year round will stay under 12% body fat. Like 10 to 12 is probably where I like to be. If I was going really, really hard, like I think the last time I actually did the nutrition challenge, like got back into the 9. But for me, I always say that. And like some people are like, well, yeah, it's just because you're genetically there. I'm like, no, I've been working out my entire life. I've been athletic my entire life. And I don't eat like a fucking idiot all the time, right? Like I have seasons, right? I have seasons where I eat more carbs. I have seasons where I eat out a little bit more. I have seasons where I DoorDash a little bit more. But like if you build a foundation, you can have a little flex, right? Because also understand that it's cyclical. But for the most part, I always prioritize protein, right? For the most part, I think I actually undereat on calories. I'm someone that can go all the way to 2, 3, 4 o'clock sometimes and not eat at all and just have like coffee, right? Or some caffeine, or today is a Ghost energy drink. So I think like just being aware of some of those things, like, the 3 most important things I think to track is like, number 1, your calories, if you have a weight loss goal or a weight gain goal. Number 2 is your protein intake. Number 3 is your fiber. Because if you were to keep the mindset around fiber and protein and your calories, it doesn't matter what the rest looks like. It could be a stick of butter. It could be white rice. It could be candy. I think there's so much flex for it too, as long as you're prioritizing the things that most people aren't prioritizing, right? Which is getting that stuff in. So nutrition obviously being a huge piece. Number 6, overstressed and underslept. Another one that seems common sense to a lot of us, but most people are just not really doing enough due diligence to actually make a priority. When it comes to sleeping, I think the most important thing is having a consistent sleep time and a consistent wake time. Obviously trying to do your best to shut down lights or shut down anything that's stimulating, right? So that could be screen time. That could be stimulants like coffee or caffeine too late in the day. That could be eating too late in the day. Stress obviously related to sleep a little bit. Those are both bidirectional. A stressed out human's not sleeping well, and underslept human's going to be more stressed, physiologically or psychologically too. But I think stress, unfortunately, and most people don't like to hear this, but stress is self-inflicted, right? Like the stress that you deal with in your life is something that you decided to make a problem, right? And that is a very oversimplified way to look at stress. But at the end of the day, we are stressed because of our points of views on things, not because the thing is actually stressful. So when you think about psychological stress, right, it's like, okay, like what are you surrounding yourself by, right? Are you watching the news or are you reading books, right? Like, are you around your friends and people you love, or are you just watching, things online all the time, right? Like, I think like really being cognizant of your environments, right? And your mindset and protecting that mind share, because your energy is a valuable resource. And if you're giving it away to a bunch of bullshit, you're naturally going to be stressed. The 2 things most people stress about, unfortunately, though, are going to be work and going to be family. I always say this with work, and I use this as a reminder almost every episode, that like picking a job that you enjoy is one of the best life hacks that you can go through. And then number 2 is picking people and being aware of the people and how they make you feel is also going to be number 2, because like if I can surround myself with people I enjoy being around, my life is good. If I can work in a place that I can spend 30, 40, 50, 60 hours a week doing and I enjoy it and there's purpose and there's fulfillment, I don't deal with as much stress. I think the biggest thing that makes me the most sad with this, especially this younger generation coming to, as they get older, is just social media. I think like being online, so like being aware of all these things, because coming back to the training, the reason why most people won't hit their goal is because when you are stressed or underslept, your motivation to do so is very low. Your motivation to be intense with your training is going to be hard. Your motivation to show up 3, 4 times a week instead of 1 or 2 times a week is going to be very hard, right? Your motivation to go be disciplined with your nutrition is going to be hard. So like it is a foundational item that is going to dictate the rest of everything that I've already talked about. So like making it a priority is changing the environment, changing your outlook and mindset too. Okay. And then number 7, last one that I have for you guys is no accountability systems. Which hurts consistency, right? Because I think like the biggest thing that I like this frame of consistency for people, because I think like I forget who says this, but there's some person I watch always says that like most things in life, like business, working out, it's not hard, right? Kind of like the statement I said earlier, where it's like It's easy but not simple, or simple not easy, however I framed it earlier. Meaning like the work that we know needs to be done to be successful at work, the work that we know that needs to be done to be successful in the gym, to see results. It's like understanding the mechanics of what makes it actually work. It's not rocket science. Like it really is not. But I would say the biggest and most important thing that you can do is the consistency over a very long period of time is going to equal results, right? People forget, like in the financial world, we use this kind of compounding effect as a term, right? Training has the same shit. Like there is a compounding effect to your training, right? Like even this statement when I was talking about my nutrition earlier, right? Like if I wasn't so consistent in my training, like if like, for example, it's like I've been training for 17, 18 years almost straight. Like I barely miss, like I don't know if I've ever had a week where I've like not had at least a workout, right? But for the most part, I average 3 to 5 workouts a week, and I've been doing that for almost 2 decades, right? And there's people that I guarantee have been doing that for way longer than I have, right? But the more consistent you are, the more of a compounding effect is created, meaning it's easier for me to have the muscle memory. It's easier for me to stay in maintenance. It's easier for me not to put on fat. Because I have a foundation of a lot of lean tissue, right? I have a foundation of training for a very long period of time where I won't lose my strength dramatically. If you're inconsistent over periods of time, and I think a lot of people screw this up, they're like, well, I was there 3-4 times a week. And I'm like, yeah, for like 2 months, and then you went on a vacation and then came back and went once. Like, so if you look at it in the macro point of view, it ends up being a little bit less consistent. But in order to create consistency, I think like when I say no accountability systems, there are a handful of people, like for me personally, I just enjoy training. Like I really do, right? So for me, it doesn't require me having systems in place to go training because like I just know that like if I don't train, I don't feel as good. But for most of us, we're not there yet, or for most of us, we might not ever be there, right? We maybe enjoy the results that it provides more than the work that's required to do so. But that's where it's like working out with your significant other, or working out with your family, or kids, or working out with your coworker or your teammate. Having accountability systems by paying for something, having accountability systems by having appointments, right? Like, there's so many different layers to accountability. Like for me with group trading, I always say that, like, even the group, right? Like working out against other people, like that's an accountability system. So like the more of these systems you guys can put in place, the more it's going to foster an environment to create consistency, right? And that consistency over a very long period of time. And the reason why I put lifestyles in my business name was for that reason. This is not an era. This is not a cycle. This is not a let's get ready for summer, then we'll figure out how to go back to normal life. Like there is no more normal life. The identity needs to change, right? Like a lot of us are saying, I want abs, but we're not identifying ourselves as someone that trains consistently, right? So the identity needs to change. It needs to become part of a lifestyle. So instead of like looking at something of like, this is a lifetime contract that you're signing for yourself, right? On how you eat, on how you train, and how you live. Like it's not an era to achieve something that is results based, right? Because if all I do is go and chase the result and then I go back to my normal lifestyle, you're going to be on and off this train for the rest of your life, right? The goal, and like the whole topic of this conversation, is the 7 reasons why people never change, right? And the 7 reasons why people never see results. So just to quickly go through it, number 1, got to have intensity behind your training. Number 2, frequency in training matters. Sometimes a lot of us need to train a little bit more than we think we need to, and that obviously can be related to intensity. 3 is have structure that progresses over time. Matters less for somebody that's new, matters more for somebody that's more vet. Number 4, outside of the gym stuff matters a lot more. So getting your step count in, minimum of 8,000, making sure you're getting aerobic work that's going to be stacked on top of your actual training. Because when you go to the gym, your goal should be to move better, feel better, and most importantly, become stronger. Number 5, most people's nutrition's trash. So optimizing the nutrition and the way you eat is going to optimize the way you feel and the way you look. Number 6, overstressed, underslept. Prioritizing that because that is the foundation to everything else that we're going to do. And then the 7th and final one is having no accountability system is going to hurt your ability to stay consistent. So build accountability, put systems in place, find consistency over a very, very long period of time, because it's not something you're doing for a period. It's something you're doing for the rest of your life, right? All right, guys. Well, I hope that one resonates with somebody. Share that with somebody maybe that needs to work on this a little bit. And I will see you guys next week.